Reddit, have the police ever had to come to your house? Why? Recently, as in last weekend, I came home mid-afternoon to a few cop cars and big armored vehicle parked outside my house. Walk up to the detective at the door knowing I haven't done anything wrong and ask what they are doing. Apparently my neighbor behind my house and across the alley was wanted for robbing a couple banks a few years ago, so they wanted to use my backyard to stage their surprise entrance on her house. It was kind of fun to watch, to be honest, and they were really nice and cool about everything. They were here 2 weeks ago. My teenage son dropped his wallet in town and some rather nice person handed it in. The cop went to the library to get his address of the card and brought it out to the house. We weren't in, so he left a card, then offered to come back out to the house with it. Since I thought enough time had been spent on it, I refused his offer and went to the station to pick it up. You monster. 2 days ago, an ex used nude photos and my new address, which he shouldn't have known, on Craigslist offering strangers sex and drugs. I had over 30 people show up knocking, and one tried to break in. After the cop parked there, nobody came by. He was very nice and said he and the others would keep an eye on my place for a while. Craigslist agreed to remove the post, but there's apparently no legal case against the ex at this point. Dang, that was cold of your ex. My neighbor once called the cops on me because they thought I was selling drugs. I live in a very nice area, have a few nice cars, but work from home as a financial consultant, so I have clients coming and going from my house a lot. I on the other hand hardly leave, which I guess led the neighborhood to think I'm a drug dealer. I probably would too. Wouldn't call the cops on you though, as long as you're not shooting at people or blasting music at 3 AM. Why do they care? Yup. Cops came to our house because of a complaint that we were devil worshippers making animal sacrifices. At the time I was a teenager and home alone. When the cops showed up, they asked me some seemingly odd questions about who lived in the house, what we did there, etc. I was confused, but gave them the normal answers. My family, we lived there, etc. Soon they got to the point and asked about animal cruelty, which completely confused me. Long story short, my dad is a hunter and recently came back with a bag of geese, or quail, I forget. He went onto the back deck to feather and butcher them. He either got distracted or lazy, because he left a bunch of feathers, blood and animal carcasses on the deck and then left the house. Soon after, the electric meter reader guy came to do his thing, stumbled upon the gruesome scene, squealed like a little girl, I assume, and called the 50 to report us as fans of the Dark Lord. In the end the cops laughed about it. The police seemed to be at my house every other week when I was growing up. Both of my older brothers discovered the world of drugs when they were in high school. I'm not talking about pot, I'm talking pills, coke, etc. One of them would come home high as heck, then start beating on someone in the family, usually my mom. Then my dad would intervene. Dad and whichever brother was the dumbass of the week would get into what could only be described as a street fight, and shortly after the cops would show up. I hated my childhood because of my brothers. One of them got clean about 8 years ago. He's now married with 2 kids, and I have a pretty decent relationship with him. I'm afraid the other one will never change. He's nothing but a liar and a thief, and I'll never trust him again. As far as I'm concerned, seeing him at Thanksgiving and Christmas is too much. That sucks, man. I hope that time of your life is over and you are happy and safe. Runaway dog got brought home by the cops, twice, and being a Canadian from a rural area, I would use the cops as free cabs all the time when I was younger. Excuse me officer, I'm drunk. Can get a hold of a cab, and don't wanna drive drunk. Can you give me a ride? You know kid, we're not a freaking cab service. Where do you live? About 4 clicks up the road. Hop in. Worked like a charm. My dad has schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type. Imagine an unholy hybrid of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and you've got it. When I was a young kid, the police were regular visitors, looking for my dad after a rampage, returning him home, checking up on us, etc. It's amazing what you get used to, and I've never been frightened of cops. They always had my back. Several times. In college, we had a couple in our apartment complex that used to call the cops for anything. One time, They called the cops because they said it appears they are housing a suspicious person. Nope, just my Algerian friend from college. Many times over my time in a college house with roommates. One notable one was when a guy in our program and a few others decided to go to the strip club in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday and get crap-faced. Some of us were just chilling at home and in bust some of our other roommates and a very inebriated friend of ours. He proceeds to have a couple more beers, and we told him he couldn't drive home. He loses his crap. He ended up in the middle of the street, a residential street mind you, yelling obscenities and such memorable phrases as "take my shirt and bury it," "tell me it's mine." Cops were called. They came and we explained to them what happened and that we didn't want him to drive home. But we also didn't want this drunk butthole freaking out in our house. They took his keys and drove him home. We did in fact bury a shirt at the end of the year when we all graduated, in his honor. Another memorable time was the last party before we moved out. Not a huge rager, probably only like 60 people. We did one smart move in informing all of our neighbors the day before via a written letter in their mailboxes. Gave them our numbers and said to call us before they called the cops if things were getting too loud. Sure enough, the cops did come, but not because anyone called them. They were just cruising the neighborhood and decided to check in on what was obviously a party. No problems. We said we would keep it down. A few hours later they came back. Again, no noise complaint was placed. They just happened to see us all outside on the lawn. Again told us to keep it down. The last and final time they came by was right when a good friend of mine was making a speech about how he would miss all of us and was in the middle of saying, "And remember the time we all did mushrooms," and a cop walked in and said, "Who's on mushrooms?" They finally just said, "Keep it down guys and go the frick to sleep. It's like 4 am. Coolest cops. Not a huge rager. Probably only like 60 people. Only 60, he says. I called the police about a woman screaming in the middle of the night somewhere close by. They came quickly and asked me some questions about the event and eventually determined that what I heard were urban foxes mating. Family and I were away on vacation, and my uncle stopped by our house to drop something off. He had a key to get in, but not a passcode for the home security system that was very much set. Normally this wouldn't have been an issue, as one phone call from the security company to one of us would have cleared it all up. Except we were in mid-flight with our phones turned off, and my uncle already has a criminal record. Alarms went off. Cops show up. Nobody goes fricking anywhere until they got a hold of us about a half hour later. Thankfully after that it got resolved, but dang, my uncle was shaken. Jesus, I read mid-fight. Mid-flight makes more sense. Not me, but my sister. She and her boyfriend were renting a house while going to college. Her boyfriend is really big into sustainable agriculture and ways to grow produce quickly and efficiently. He had a small hydroponics system in a walk-in closet. It turns out police in my sister's area use heat imaging to find people growing weed with hydroponic systems. So one day my sister and her boyfriend get a knock on the door and the police ask if they can look around her house. My sister lets them in and they go straight to the closet where they find the biggest dang eggplants they've ever seen. They then thank my sister and leave embarrassed. TLDR. Police try to bust my sister for growing weed and instead find eggplant and an embarrassing lack of illegal activity. My friend dared me to run up my hill naked. Police were in the park opposite my house, investigating an unrelated issue. Police officer sees me and starts running after me. I run into house and police officer spends the night banging on the door. Next day, I come home after school and see the police officer. He told my mum. Cue beating. I came home from work one day and there was a cop at my door. I asked him, "What's going on?" He said there were reports of my dogs chasing people on bikes. I told him that was impossible. My dogs can't ride bike. When my husband was in grad school, I cleaned houses to keep us afloat. One night, we had a local detective show up at our door. He told us one of my clients had an expensive ring go missing and asked if he could search our apartment. We thought about not letting him in, but we had nothing to hide and we really didn't want any more attention from the police than necessary. We let him do a cursory search. Honestly, he basically just came in, looked around a bit in the living room and left. He called the next day to say my client had found her ring. I called the client and told her I would not be returning to clean her house. She apologized and begged me to come back. I'm an excellent cleaner. I told her I was sorry but I could not work for someone who did not trust me in their home. I don't know how she could have expected you to return. That's pretty dang insulting. When I was in my mid-20s, my uncle upgraded his HD projector and gave me the old one. So for Halloween, we haul it out into the parking lot and start playing the abominable Dr. Phibes on the side of our apartment complex, so that the passing foot traffic could see. Later in the night, we got bored and hooked up Guitar Hero. Around 11:30, a cop car rolls up, and the cops get out and tell us that there's been a noise complaint. The entire time he's talking to me, he's kinda looking up at this 2-story projection, and was really cool about the whole thing. The conversation went something like this: "We can turn it off and take it in, officer." "Oh, you don't have to do that. They were saying it was primarily just the bass, so if you dial it back, you should be fine." Zid eyes the officer suspiciously. "Do you want to play?" Officer gives a long hard look at the setup. "Sorry, I'm on duty." Yes. A few months back we had a cinder block thrown through the picture window in our office, so we had to call the cops at 3:30 AM. They were very nice and very attractive. So this happened a few years ago. My family and I had recently moved to the States and before this point had never had a smoke detector in our kitchen. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. It seems silly to me now. As such, we had no idea how temperamental they were or what one going off actually meant. One day my mom was cooking a type of orange chicken over the stove, in a pot that was too small for the amount of stock she had put in. As a result, the pot boiled over considerably and set off the smoke alarm. We, never having heard that blood-curdling sound before, were both shocked and frightened, and, in a moment of idiocy, we decided it was a good idea to call 911 and ask them how to turn off the smoke alarm. Well, 4 cop cars, 2 fire trucks, and a good laugh later, we never made that mistake again. Glad you see the value of a smoke detector. A lot of immigrants in my town take them down because they make noise. It has led to a few fires. To take my white, middle-class father in for questioning under the Terrorism Act. A pair of peregrine falcons were nesting on a nearby police station, so he decided to sit in his car with a pair of binoculars and watch them for an hour or so while my mum was doing some shopping. Instead of just approaching him, they traced his registration plate and showed up in the early hours of the morning the next day. He's been asked not to do it again unless he goes in and tells the officers in the station first. At least we know they weren't racially profiling him. Yep, I called them after a friend decided to try and rob my house. They also brought an ambulance with him. He apparently fell while climbing out the back window. I had a man break into my house while I was at a robotics club meeting. It was literally right after school, and had I not gone to that meeting, we wouldn't have been robbed. But hey, what happened happened, and we got a good insurance payout to help out. While I was living in Georgia, I got a knock on the door on a Saturday morning by a correctional officer with a shotgun out. It turns out he was in charge of the chain gang and asked to use our outside water tap so the prisoners could get a drink. I of course agreed. As the day went on, the heat got worse and the humidity was unbearable. I had some leftover bags of ice and some powdered pink lemonade I took out with some plastic cups and gave them to the officer, which he gave out to the prisoners. They thanked me by trimming some bushes and edged my lawn. My mom was getting a splinter out of my little brother's hand when I was about 4. Being the responsible elder sibling, I decided to call the police, and all they heard was a child screaming down the phone with me calling for help. About 5 squad cars turned up 10 minutes later demanding that my mom got on the floor and put her hands on her head. This is a story that is brought up at most family get-togethers nowadays. AWW. During a snowstorm, my wife, and her cousin were at a party at a friend's place, and 1 kilometer from home. Police showed up around 2 AM due to noise complaint. Party quieted down, but that was our cue to leave. Started getting ready to walk home, and the officer gave the old "you aren't driving tonight, are you" line. No sir, just live down the road. He decided we were too drunk to walk in a storm and offered to give us a lift. We gratefully accepted. We pulled into the driveway and I said something to the effect of, "Great, now the neighbors will gossip about us being brought home in a cop car." Cop grins and says, "You want the lights me?" Frick yeah, he lit up the blue and reds and hit the siren for a sec just for good measure. I called them on my stepdad for beating me. Wasn't the most fun experience in the world, but the officers were all very nice. I had a going away party before I moved out of the state. It was a pretty good party for my dorky standards. We even had live music, lots of drinking, smoking weed, etc. A few people at the party were under 21. It was a quiet, residential neighborhood, but a college town, so most neighbors were conditioned to parties and didn't mind too much. Someone called the cops, and they came knocking on the door on the side of the house. It was open, but the screen door was closed. Everyone starts scattering and trying to hide stuff, and I go answer the door. At least a couple of Jaeger bombs, bowls of the good stuff, etc. into my night. And I'm all, "Yes officer, can I help you?" And he says, "We got a call saying someone was running naked down the street around here," to which I responded, "Well officer, as you sir, as you sir, as you sir, as you no naked people running around here. He just told us to enjoy our night and not get too loud," and went on his way. No harm, no foul. I was so proud to have thrown a party wild enough for the cops to come. As an aside, it actually was someone from my party that ran down the road, but he just had his shirt off, so I think the naked guy running down the road was an exaggeration. TLDR. Cops were looking for naked men running around. I had a sheriff show up at my door once looking for a former resident. He said without skipping a beat as I opened the door, "And I crap you not. I'm looking for and you're not him, so I'll let you get back to whatever you were doing." My neighbor got super drunk and started pulling out his guns, threatening to shoot his wife, etc. Cops got called. SWAT team came. Cops come to my house to ask us to leave for a while because bullets can go through your walls. No shots were fired. The situation resolved itself when he, in a wife beater and boxer shorts, walked onto his front porch with a bottle of Jack and a .357 yelling, "You'll never take me alive." The cops tackled him. A month later, him and his wife moved to Florida. Probably got a scholarship to become a true Florida man. To give me a ride home when I was drunk after they saw me stumbling around in the snow at 2 AM because I gave my cab driver the wrong address. I had recently moved. Here's the story I shared with our drunk last year the day after it happened. So last night I was so drunk I gave the cab the wrong address when I was trying to get home from the bar. He ended up dropping me off like a mile away from where I lived. I walked around trying to get my bearings and slipped on the ice, re-breaking the frames of my glasses and hurting my knee. Eventually I reached what I thought was my entrance to my apartment and tried to get in, but none of my keys worked. I smoked a cigarette and tried calling my roommate, but he didn't pick up. I looked for my car on the street and realized it was not there. I must be at the wrong place. A few minutes later I see a cop car driving up and they stop right in front of me. They ask, "Do you know where you are?" And I said something along the lines of, "Honestly, officers, I'm really drunk. Can you please give me a ride home?" They looked at each other and kind of laughed and one of them said, "I've been there before man. Let me see your ID so I can run your information real quick." I gave them my ID and got in the back seat. I explained more about what happened as they ran my name on their computer. I came up clean, so they decided to give me a ride home. On the way there we talked more, but the best part was when we got close and I told them it's a pain in the butt to get to because of one-way streets and the one driving looks back and says, "Are you kidding? Look at who you're talking to." He then flashed his lights and went down the wrong way of a one-way street. They dropped me off and told me to stay safe. I honestly felt like I was in Superbad and thought they were awesome for not citing me or taking me to jail. Called 911 when my dad had a heart attack. About 12 AM. Saw someone at the door in a uniform and told them to come in. Turned around and was surprised to see a cop. I had a neighbor who absolutely hated us. We were three 21-year-olds and had just purchased the condo. Well, the neighbor proceeded to call the cops on us every other day. About the third time the police came it was just us three watching cops. Yep, the cops showed up while we were watching cops. They got a good chuckle out of that. After a few weeks of coming out and now knowing all the different cops on a first name basis, they finally went to the neighbors and asked the neighbors to stop wasting their time. Copception. 21st birthday. It was a relatively small party, 30-40 people or so, because we wanted it low-key because most of my friends were underage by a couple months. Music was too loud, so the neighbors called the cops on us. The police came around in the backyard where a couple of my friends were having a cigarette and asked them to keep the music down. Friends were 20 that were out there, but luckily they were my sensible friends and told the cops they would keep it down. And they were sorry because it was a birthday party. I didn't realize the severity of it at the time, but the next morning I realized, holy crap, if those cops weren't so cool I could have gotten my butt thrown in jail so fast for providing alcohol to minors, house parties, noise violations. A friend had the cops come to his house at one point too. He got his own house that was a fixer-upper when he was about 24-25, and it was a really nice house in a good neighborhood. All of the neighbors liked him except for one crotchety senior. He got the cops called on him saying that they were suspicious of him growing marijuana because there was always a light on at night. In reality, it was just because he would get drunk and work on the house at midnight. The cops showed up but didn't even knock on the door, and instead just stalked around the house in the middle of the night with flashlights. My friend, being a really paranoid dude, grabbed a bat and let his huge, like 110 pounds, dog outside. Luckily nobody was hurt and the cops explained themselves. He actually made a complaint to the department about people stalking his house in the middle of the night and saying that it was incredibly unsafe. Asking what they expected would happen when people were shining lights in his house in the middle of the night, and it was lucky nobody got beaten or shot. The police department actually agreed with him and apologized. Geez, thankfully no one got hurt. Twice when I lived in my previous apartment. 1. My car matched the description of a vehicle involved in a hit and run. They just wanted to take a look to see if it had any damage. 2. We asked them to come when a drunk college girl was walking into random apartments, peed on our steps, and, when she didn't recognize anyone in any of the apartments she walked into, remained standing and shivering near our dumpster in sub-freezing temperatures with no winter coat on. My parents were on vacation and I got back from college a week early, so naturally my girlfriend came over. The neighbors saw an unfamiliar car in the driveway and called the cops. I answered the door in my underwear with my girlfriend standing on the stairs half naked. Cop gave me an approving nod and told me to have a good night. All was well in the end. What a bro. Some crackhead broke into an old lady's house near me, stole her meds, then decided to hide out in the woods behind my house. So I'm in the kitchen, wife next to me in her underwear, and I look up to see a cop staring at us, my wife's boobs, from just outside the kitchen window. I yell, "Hey officer, everything okay?" and he's like in a trance, then just looks at me with this stupid sheepish grin and tells me what's up. Now I don't really care when guys check out my wife's awesome boobs. Crap, I've caught my dad doing it. But seriously, you're just going to stand there for God knows how long ogling my wife while a burglar runs loose behind my house? Frick that. A neighbor girl was raising money for DARE, and so my mom wrote her a check for $5. It was the 90s. A few days later an officer shows up at our door because the check was written as $15 in numbers, but $5 was written out in words. Apparently the neighbor girl changed the check from $5 to $15 to try to raise a little more money. Brilliant. Idiot. Everyone knows to change the words to $15 and 0/100. Yup, tried to kill myself. The police chief interrupted and saved my life. His brother has the same mental disorder I do. The suicide is a psychotic delusion of starting over, not to end life. Interesting delusion anyway. Glad you're still here. Oh yes. Back in 1991 when we lived in a shithole basement flat with no phone, my husband fell asleep on the last train home from work and ended up in the middle of nowhere. Bridgend actually. He left the station to find the nearest police station to see if they could get a message to me. Then he spent a very long cold night on the station platform. It was February. Meantime the police appeared on my doorstep at 12:30 in the morning to tell me my husband was at T. Safe, but still at T. Can confirm. Bridgend is the middle of nowhere. This summer they came to take me back to the mental hospital. I was stupid. I got out, ran home, in those dang paper slippers, and then stupidly answered the door when they knocked. Caught. Cops were called because my brother shot at the neighbor's dog with an unloaded BB gun. Cops weren't called, but still showed up because somebody was lighting crap on fire inside the church next to my house. Cops were called because our backyard grass was too high. Frick you guy that lived behind us. He freaked out if our baseball so much as rolled into his perfect grass. Your grass looked the same as everyone else's. See? Cops showed up because garage caught on fire and they kind of just had to be there. Cops showed up on several occasions due to my brother and explicit messages being transferred over his phone. Cops showed up because my mom enjoyed leaving the bar very drunk and driving home several times. Cops showed up because we called them after getting home and finding lights on when we definitely turned them off. Never found out how that happened. Cops showed up. No, that's pretty much it actually. For that house anyway. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.